Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Out of Spec podcast. I'm your host, Francie. How is it going? Today, I am joined by my lovely colleague, Max, who happens to own and drive a Polestar 2. And we're going to be talking about the 2025 Polestar 3 SUV and the reviews that have been pouring in. Spoiler alert, they're pretty positive, despite the long timeline that we have seen with this automaker getting this SUV out. So let's plug in for all the details on this EV, what folks think about the drive and the car, and then what we find interesting about this one. This episode is made possible by the support we get from Fort Collins Kia. If you are in the market for any electric Kia, not only do they never add market adjustments, they will deliver your car to you anywhere in the 48 contiguous states for out-of-spec viewers. More information in the link in the show notes. Okay, Max. So before we get into the conversation, I want to tell you a bit of a story about Polestar 3 from my family, if you don't mind, because
Sure,
I think it'll add some
please do.
context. Okay. So my sister's father-in-law placed an order for a Polestar 3, had never driven electric before, but he had gone to, a showroom and sat in one. And he was like, this is nice. I like the minimal design. Seems cool, ready to embrace electric, sure. And so we were chatting about that months ago over dinner when he was visiting after he had placed the order. And I asked him all about the reasoning why and what he liked. And, I also asked when he should get it. And then over the months, as I would see his son, my brother-in-law, I'd be like, hey, did your dad get his Polestar 3 yet? No. Okay. What about now? No. Okay. And then this most recent time, when I see my brother-in-law, I asked him again, and he tells me that his dad had gotten so little communication from Polestar, had his delivery date pushed back again and again and again, that he actually canceled his order, and he went and got an Audi, and it's not even an e-tron. So after he canceled the order, then he got an email from Polestar that was like, wait. Don't do that. Please stick around. But it wasn't convincing enough. So I think he wasn't the only one experiencing this delayed timeline with this EV. But I'm glad to hear that it's being well received after waiting for so long.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, Francie, because I think it tells a lot of the story of the EV market, especially the past few years, where people get on Tesla's case for announcing the Roadster in, I think, 2019, and it's still not here, and the Cybertruck took a while to come out. But there's also been lots of fly-by-night companies that announce EVs. They have a Photoshop render, and it never comes out. And to be fair to Polestar, that's not the case there. They are a real car company. They are a startup within the Geely Automotive Group. They used to have the strong partnership with Volvo. They still do, but now Volvo no longer owns part of them. But basically, they make the Polestar 2, which I drive. It's a great mass-market EV. That's their mainstream product, right? And then, there's other episodes we've done on Polestar. People curious about the brand can check that out. They did make the Polestar 1, which was an interesting experiment. But the 3, this is really their time to kind of, make a splash. Like what your father-in-law saw in that is basically a very compelling, well-designed, high-performance vehicle. This is their flagship. This is not the Polestar 2, which I have. Again, I love the car, but the car, it's more of a Tesla Model 3 competitor. It's premium maybe, but definitely not luxury. Polestar 3 is absolutely luxury. So for context here, I think a lot of people watching this would be familiar with the Volvo XC90. 3-row mom SUV, great car. My mom actually used to have one, the 2015 version, when they redesigned it last time. Well, Volvo is redesigning it again for the electric age. They've got the EX90, and that's built on basically the next version of that platform. So Polestar has taken this platform and built the Polestar 3. And we'll take a look at this in a second, look at reviews, but basically what they've done is they've taken the 3-row mom SUV and they've spicified it. They've actually taken out practicality. Not only is there less storage space, but there's one fewer row of seats. So it's a 2-row SUV, and it's a very large 2-row SUV, meaning that for the passengers who are in it, they're very comfortable, but it's unabashedly less practical, unapologetically, one might say, and it's a bit faster. However, 0 to 60 times, if for those keeping score here, are like, I think 4.8 seconds, 4.5 seconds for performance. So for those comparing to Model Y and Tesla Model X, you might look at that and say, whoa, that's not very good. that's really not what this EV is playing against. This is a very European style EV. The reason I say that here, again, sorry to monologue so much, but the Polestar story is so confusing, is because this, like your story, Francie, has been delayed so long that in the time it's taken to come out, the Polestar 4 is also ready for mass market and is already being sold in China, I think in Europe, starting to be sold in the US. So the Polestar 4 almost leapfrogged the Polestar 3. And the Polestar 4, which we did an episode on, but to quickly recap, that's a totally different vehicle. It's actually in between this and the Polestar 2. It's premium, not as luxury. It's not really an SUV. It's a bit lower to the ground. And it's more Chinese. I say it's more Chinese not as like a xenophobic thing. It's literally built off a Chinese car platform within Geely. This is built off SPA 2, which is a Volvo platform. So the taste and the design of the car are much more European. It's competing with rivals like the BMW iX, the Porsche Cayenne EV upcoming. I guess you could compare this to the Macan, which already does exist in electric form, but this is a bit larger, a bit more premium. Anyhow, that's my whole spiel, Francie. I'm curious your thoughts on that as a normal person, and just the design of the Polestar 3 since we have it pulled up here.
Yeah, I do. If you're tuning in on YouTube, you can see it. We're going to pull this up and tell you about all the specs and then dive into more of the reviews as well. But yeah, I think it's important to note, like, okay, the potential with the Polestar 3 coming to the market. I do think that the more space, people have looked for that in EVs, not necessarily three-row SUV, but just bigger in general. And I think that this could have a convincing factor about it that, like they say here, yes, it's an SUV and it drives like a sports car. It's a luxury premium electric vehicle. It has the minimal design and it also has pretty decent specs. So one thing I also wanted to mention is that, kind of like you said, but the first wave of these coming into the country were made in China, but the rest of them, the 2025 Polestar 3s, will be built in the US at Volvo's plant in Charleston, South Carolina. So technically looking better there for any potential tax credits, which we love to see, of course, especially with an MSRP of $73,000 right here, with various packages that you can add on that I think take it to mid $80,000 if you really pack it on there. So the powertrain, it's a dual motor, all-wheel drive variants. Love to hear that too. When I first went with my Subaru, all-wheel drive was important just because, like, I don't know always where I'm going to go, but if I can get there, that's the most important part. It is pretty quick, 4.9 seconds, 0 to 60. And it has an estimated range. I will actually pull this up as well because, of course, it depends on if you have the long-range dual motor or the long-range dual motor with performance packs. So it ranges from 315 miles to 279 miles. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing crazy, but those are good numbers. Again, haven't tested them. We always have our caveat where it's like, yes, this is the EPA estimated range, but we like to charge it up to 100, run it at 70 miles an hour, and wait till it's at 0% and tell you exactly what happened. So that's kind of our perspective there. Seems like charging is decent. So charging time, 10 to 80% in 30 minutes. That's a pretty good stat if that stays true. What do you think, Max?
Yeah, that's kind of a benchmark time there, 30-minute, 10 to 80. That's been the status quo. They're not exactly pushing the envelope here, right? We've seen vehicles from Genesis in Hyundai Motor Group, right? But let's say I would compare this to like the Genesis GV70 electrified or even the GV60 potentially, right? Those are high-end luxury electric SUVs. Those have 800-volt class charging. And what that means in non-nerd terms is they can charge from 10 to 80% in just about half the time, which is amazing. Granted, they do have smaller batteries, but they're also a bit more efficient vehicles. And that tells us a lot about how Polestar is positioning this, Francie, because this is a performance vehicle first and foremost. So especially if you get the performance pack, that makes it even spicier. You get wider tires, larger diameter wheels with less surface area, more of a disrupted pattern that disrupts airflow and takes away range. Oftentimes, nerdy note here, people think, oh, an EV being heavier and having more powerful motors means less range. Not actually the case. The longest range EVs in the world are like, let's say, the Tesla Model S or the Lucid Air, right, Francie? Those are vehicles with a lot of power. So you can have motors with lots of power and lots of range. It's just when you spec them with big wheels and big tires, that's the thing that sucks down the range. And so Polestar hasn't really built this, and we can see the design for aerodynamics. Now they do have this cool thing on the hood that like scoops the air, but you can look at those range numbers, right? 280, 315. I assume that's based off EPA certification. We'll have to test it like you mentioned yourself, but those are hardly impressive. I would say they're just about acceptable in today's market, especially considering this has a large battery. For the nerds out there, 111 kilowatt hours, I believe. So it's not a small pack.
No, not a small pack at all. Lithium ion battery, of course, not an LFP as far as I know, but a big battery, which is typically we see, 100 or less, and they make do with what they have and trying to make it as efficient as possible. But they have packed a bit more capacity in here, which is interesting. I also think that this in general, I mean, I really like the look of this. I really like their specs. I think, like we said, it's not groundbreaking, but it does seem like it would fit just, I don't know. I think it's fitting into a part of the market that's a little bit open right now.
Yeah.
I think with the specific Volvo design as well, because it's kind of like the mom car, but the family car, like the well-off family car for sure, but pretty interesting. The motors as well, there are the two 180 kilowatt permanent magnetic motors, and they are liquid cooled as well. If anyone wants that motor detailing, because we see a couple different configurations coming out in EVs. It's always interesting to compare what the strategies are, but they're not going for anything crazy here. So those are a bit of the specs. Of course, it's like Volvo tied. So I always think of safety, pretty good ratings. They have the LiDAR camera, and
well, you mentioned a great point there. A few things I want to say, Francie, but you said, right, this is kind of a white space in EVs, and you're absolutely right about that. I mentioned BMW iX. You could also say Mercedes EQS SUV, perhaps Rivian R1S. These are all very distinct vehicles. Many of them distinguish themselves with 3 rows. And this takes the EX90 platform and actively makes it less practical. And it's not without precedent in cars. Like if you look at a BMW X5M or the existing Porsche Cayenne, those vehicles are also very sporty. At the time, sportiness at the compromise of practicality. This is doing that in electric, and I think this is the first EV to do that, which is cool. Now, some people will roll their eyes and say, great, an EV that costs more, is less practical, less range, and it's sportier. Well, people who like sportiness will accept a few compromises, so I love that Polestar has taken it upon themselves to make this thing unabashedly sporty, and I agree with you. Looks wise, just I think really stunning. I think this is the best looking vehicle they've put on the market. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what lease deals they come out with, because as we know, EV automakers are making a lot of great competitive lease deals. And I think this would be an awesome option for like families I know that have their 2-car solution where they're not ready to go fully electric. So they're going to keep one ICE, but then they could have a nice leased Polestar 3 to drive around the city and feel comfortable and make, whatever trips, get comfortable at least. And I mean, I don't know. We've seen some Polestar leases before. Of course, this is brand spanking new. They probably don't want to throw them out right away. But what do you think?
Yeah, value and pricing wise, you mentioned earlier, right? This being built, I think, starting off or past the first few model or first few ones they ship will be built in the US. That's important not only for getting the tax credit, because I don't think this will, because I think realistically most trims of this are going to come in above 80 grand, most of the desirable packages people are going to want. But I do think that it's important for them because with Volvo and Polestar building both the EX90 and this Polestar 3 in South Carolina, they could take take advantage of a special loophole in the tax credit and basically use the duty drawback program, a loophole just in the government in general, right? We've talked before about not only tax credits, but actual import fees, huge duties placed on Chinese EVs. The Biden administration announced several weeks ago, 100%, right? Well, they can get around that because not only are they making these in the US, that helps them offset other ones that are made in China. So currently the Volvo EX30 is made in China, and Polestar 2, I guess, is made in China. So they could potentially import those still, using credits of this vehicle. And that's based not on a vehicle per vehicle basis, but it's a price traded basis. So what that means is, let's say a $90,000 Polestar 3 rolls at the factory, that's $90,000 in import credit that Polestar gets to bring in Polestar 2s, let's say. So that could be 2 Polestar 2s. So this being a premium vehicle and the building in the US is actually very important for them scaling up.
Really good points there. Yeah, we covered all of those proposed tariffs that are really, I mean, they're hefty. They are really bringing up the tariffs on a lot of lithium-ion EVs and batteries, and the critical components that are coming from China and other specific entities, and putting the pressure on the U.S. to try to build these up. And we're still learning how to do that within our own borders and figuring out how to do that, I guess, realistically. So it's interesting to see how that will play into things, what the way it is now, the way the market is now, and then what it might look like as more of these become available and what might be actually available to use. Speaking of what's available, we have it pulled up to the Denver showroom, but I also wanted to mention that there are 3 major packages that you can get with the Polestar 3, the Pilot, the Plus, and the Performance. So the Pilot pack is now the standard one. It has the advanced driver assistant features like the lane centering and a 360-degree camera system. The Plus pack adds the more luxury elements, I'd say, like the 25-speaker Bowers and Wilkins audio system, which I love the audio. Man, if I just had all the money in the world, I would be jamming in the nicest cars. They have the heated rear seats and then the synthetic leather or the wool seats, and then the Performance. Which one would you choose, do you think, Max? Or are you a performance guy?
So right off the bat, I do want to say these are launch edition cars. That is a similar thing for Polestar 2 in its first model year. Launch edition cars will actually come with certain packages basically included. So Pilot and Plus, I think, are the 2 here that are on every one of these cars. So if you're watching this podcast, in the year of our Lord 2024 right now, at day and date as the car's coming out, you only have 2 options. Do you get the normal car or do you get it with Performance? And of course, I guess you can choose the paint color and the seat material perhaps, but those are your real big options here. I would, of course, love the Performance. I will take the range hit. Performance will come with, as we expect with Polestar, the gold Brembo brake calipers, these gold seat belts, gold valve stem covers, lots of fun details there. At the sacrifice of range. I think the wheel designs look great. Also, what's interesting is whether you get the Performance or not, you said earlier, Francie, right? The motors for this, fairly standard, nothing too crazy. Performance actually doesn't jump up the motors that much, just 10 kilowatts on each motor. So that's like an extra 40-ish overall extra horsepower with the Performance pack. That's not what it's about. It's about those components like the better suspension, the better brake package. But all Polestar 3s ride on a rear motor that has a mechanical clutch, which helps it do real torque vectoring. And that is really cool because the Polestar 2 didn't have that. Not aware, short of maybe Porsche Taycan, any other EVs in the market that have this, but basically that allows the car to overdrive one wheel and help it turn in. The Polestar 1 did this because it had electric motors on each in each wheel on the rear axle, and this can do it too with the mechanical clutch system. So that's really cool. Maybe we'll see this in other EVs. I think they're using a Berg and Warner system. It's some German company that provides it, or Austrian perhaps. I'm not sure, but it's got a performance pedigree. It's a really cool component. I think it just speaks a lot to the kind of market this car is targeted at, even if you're not getting the super spicy performance package.
And we haven't gotten the chance to drive this yet as the out of spec team, but other reviewers from Motor Trend, Green Car Reports, Car and Driver did. And as we were kind of talking about earlier, Max, these were pretty glowing reviews. I know that you said maybe it's not the most like it's a little impractical in some ways, but that it was because some of the reviews were that it is pretty practical. I mean, it's not the best specs all over, but a nice balance between performance and luxury. They praised the technology, the comfortable interior, which you can see on the screen if you're tuning in on YouTube, and that it handled well, and that the weight of it, kind of that it had this good center of balance, which I know the VinFast weighs a ton, and it does seem pretty solid on the ground at the very least. And then also it was noted to be pretty efficient driving it around. Of course, we would love to test that ourselves. And Polestar also has the eco-friendly approach. So when it comes to EVs, people might not really care about that, or they might think that, okay, that's cool. I like to align myself with a brand that's at least trying to be a little bit eco-friendly one way or another. So they do have that going for them as well. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about the generally impressed reviews?
Yeah, I mean, Motor Trend, Car and Driver, lots of also, outlets in the UK, in Europe, abroad,
Yeah,
Asia, Australia have tested this thing. And I think everyone's been pretty impressed, especially from the driving dynamics, which is what's important here, because that's what distinguishes this, right? In EV land, I think you and Jordan and Kyle actually wrote on this, right? The SQ8 e-tron from Audi. You've got, I
yeah.
mentioned the BMW iX and that stuff. And those are all nice luxury SUVs, but they're not that hardcore. They're not that sporty. And this thing is. Like you said, it is heavy still, but things like having that clutch system, having, if you get the performance pack, decently wide tires, having really good chassis, just handling and tuning, I think it's going to contribute to a really fun driving experience. Like you said, we haven't driven this ourselves. I'd love to get behind the wheel of this thing. I've taken a look in the Polestar showroom when I was looking at the refreshed Polestar 2. They invited us journalists to, just ooh and ah at like a pre-production model. And as I
Right.
understand it, a lot of the hardware of this car has actually been finished for quite a while. The delay has been the software, and that's why folks like your father-in-law have had such an unfortunate experience. Is
Mm.
just the software not being finished. This has been a problem both for Polestar and for Volvo because these are built on, again, a shared platform. And I think that's a
Mhm.
big problem. I'm not actually convinced they fixed it because the early reviews, while all positive, they had two complaints. One was the price, which I think, people ultimately have to get over. Like Polestar is positioning itself as a premium performance brand. Maybe they'll have incentives. Maybe the market will respond. But I think for how much car you're getting, it's actually not a terrible price, especially when you consider its German, European rivals, right? Those cars also don't deliver amazing specs on paper, but they have brands people care about, good designs, all those things. Now, do American consumers care about the Polestar brand that much to equate it on that even footing? Well, Polestar is confident enough to think so, but maybe not. But I think just objectively, in terms of car for the money, it's actually not a terrible deal. It's not a slamming deal. It's no Model 3 performance, but that's not who this car is targeted at. So I think we can disregard the price complaint for now. But software. Early reviews mentioned that this car, despite not shipping until August, right? It is there's the note disclaimer that it's pre-production software, still didn't seem that finished. And I think that's an issue because if it
Mm.
hasn't been finished in the whatever it has been, 6 months to a year plus, they've delayed this thing. I don't frankly, Francie, see it being perfected within the next couple of months. Maybe I'll be wrong, proven wrong here, and this Google system will be amazing, but just from my own experience as a Polestar 2 owner, I can tell you I like the Google software a lot in my Polestar 2. I like the app. It does the phone is key functionality, the remote, climate conditioning, all these cool things that like Tesla owners and Rivian owners have come to expect, but it does them kind of in a buggy way. It's clunky at times. It's not the most fleshed out. And this system seems a bit more advanced. It's the next version of that Android system. It's running a very cool NVIDIA, chipset. It's got all the technology, but it just seems like from the early reviews and just the story of this car being delayed, I'm suspecting the software might still have a few kinks to sort out. So I'm
Mm.
hoping it's nothing super serious like what we've seen with Fisker Ocean, where like key fobs weren't working and, things like that. Polestar can draw on Volvo, they can draw on Geely, the Polestar 2, all the basics of that car work fine. It's just the app level, the connectivity stuff is a little bit broken. And right now, that's not like a must have for car buyers. But if Polestar does want to be a tech forward brand, I think they need to like move 10 times quicker on this than they've been doing. I don't know what's going on in there, but it's not good. And they're not the first European automaker we've seen struggle with this, right? Volkswagen has famously dealt with a lot of software issues in their vehicles. It's delayed vehicle launches. It's hurt customer satisfaction numbers because people don't like the buggy touchscreens. They seem to maybe finally be turning that ship around, but it's taken them years, billions of dollars, at least millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, several software teams, lots of high profile executive departures. I don't know what needs to happen at Volvo and Polestar, but I mean, call me cynical here, but I think things need to change because that's not okay. Like a vehicle this good has been delayed for so long, frustrating the company, consumers, shareholders, everyone involved because of what seems like to be, unfinished software.
Yeah, because I mean, do we have any really details besides that there were software issues with the electric platform? Like, what were the specifics? Because I'm trying to understand if they communicated that well and a bit more about the issues. Because, yeah, if it's taking it this long, you start to
We
lose hope a
don't.
little bit.
Yeah, we don't entirely know. As I understand it, there were different things involved, right? I think part of it had to do with just the OS, what the users interact with in the car, not being finished, but also the driving assistance stack, because that runs very complex software. This is a big step up. This car will be optionable with LiDAR soon, not actually from launch, but it will have LiDAR eventually. So clearly they're building up very advanced autonomous features, and the safety features, of course, that Volvo heritage. It's going to be theoretically a leader there. But as I understand it, the final calibration and tuning of that has just taken them a long while. So I'm not exactly sure what it's been, but things have not been all sunshine and roses in the software departments for Volvo and Polestar.
No, I'd love to hear from anyone in the comments who, I mean, either was looking at this or did experience their delays, their delivery being pushed back and pushed back. Software having issues, like you were saying, it's not uncommon, but to the degree at which it affects the whole production and delivery and delay of an EV into a market, I think that's pretty dramatic. And of course, we like to be hopeful. We would like it to work out. Like you're saying, this is a great option. For it to fall short due to, crappy user interface, I think that would be quite the shame. I mean, I use VinFast user interface, which is, glitchy. And it just really to have the seamless experience with the software that you're using, especially with EVs being so software oriented, from being able to control it from your phone on an app to being in the car and feeling like it's just simple and easy to use. It's so significant. I think it's a huge value add.
Yeah, my hot take here, Francie, is that Polestar has a lot to learn from Ford here, because in the industry, we've seen, obviously, software is very difficult. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not going to pretend to know the solutions here. But if there's any two companies that have this figured out in the EV industry, it's Rivian and Tesla, who are not burdened by the way that legacy auto companies work. And I'd say Ford is right behind them in having still, I think, pretty bad software. Like Jordan was in the F-150 Lightning a lot recently. I know he did not love that voice assistant, that mapping experience. I don't like the software particularly a lot in Ford vehicles, but the cool thing about Ford is every time we've spoken to them. I think you've spoken to folks at Ford. Kyle has, plenty of journalists. The executives are very open about the fact that, yes, we know there's issues. We're working on improving it. They're very transparent. They realize it's an issue that they need to address. And I think that's really helped a lot with both consumers and journalists in the media, right? Everyone understanding what they're trying to do, right? They're turning around a very big ship. It's a hard job. However, I really, really appreciate all the folks at Ford who did an excellent job communicating these struggles. Polestar, I think, could learn from that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's, a lot of complicated players. Their executive, probably not a native English speaker, Chinese owner. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, right? So maybe it's hard for them to message compared to a company like Ford, who is very much American, but at least me speaking here to the American buyer, the American buying demographic, the Polestar brand, if it wants to be taken seriously on issues like this, has to be a lot more transparent. Otherwise people won't take it seriously.
I completely agree. I think no one expects this to be easy to create EVs at this point in time. Make a car that works for sure, but to continue to iterate and improve, like you're saying, Rivian and Tesla and Ford are upfront about and transparent about, is something that definitely seemed to lack, at least from, my sister's father-in-law's experience. One thing was that he was not getting communication about exactly why this was happening and the delays were happening, and that could have changed his mind if he had better insight into what the problem was, even better just communication with a representative from the company instead of an email that said, addressed him first name, last name. It wasn't even filled in with his first and last name. So it's dropping the ball. Like, of course, this is hard. Be transparent. Communication is certainly key if you're going to succeed. And you're making an impression of the brand onto a market that's fresh and new and wants to adopt them or needs to be convinced. And if you don't do that transparently, I think you lose a lot of value. So I totally agree there. And that, maybe it's a cultural study, but I think everyone everywhere could benefit from a bit more transparent communication.
Absolutely. It's such a big thing, right? The product, as we've seen here, seems to be really good. You can make some nitpicks about, oh, it's still a 400 volt EV. Clearly, Polestar is working on higher voltage EVs. We talked a few weeks ago about the demo they did with Store Dot and the Polestar 5 prototype. They are working on this, but for the time being, I think it's perfectly fine, if not the bleeding edge. What they've done all around is make a great product. Now they just need to, one, sell in the US, make sure they're able to do that without tariffs or all those duties making that impossible for them. So hopefully the South Carolina plant is humming along just fine. And two, they got to communicate with customers, with the media, with everyone. They do, unlike Tesla, have a PR department. They do have press events. That's great. But just when it comes to customers, they have to do a better job dealing with folks like your sister's father-in-law, dealing with folks like my uncle, who's also very interested in the Polestar 3. He's been cross-shopping, thinking, will I wait for a Rivian R2? He loved the Fisker Ocean for its design, but I've told him repeatedly, be careful with that because we've seen the media around that vehicle. So, it's great to have all this positive press and praise for Polestar 3. Clearly, the folks in Sweden here have made a very great product. It's just they need to, get the last mile here. So I'm rooting for them. I hope they do well, and I hope this critique doesn't come off too strong. I'm clearly a fan of the brand, but I'm just trying to, put my journalist hat on here and see a few issues. So hopefully things work out well for them. It's good that they've launched this. And yeah, just a very exciting moment in the industry to finally see these EVs we've been waiting for so long finally hit the market.
Yes, I agree. And I think your point of view of looking at the weak points here is important because it took them a bit to get out here. It's time if you're going to really have a chance. They've been in the headlines of, Volvo's no longer an owner. What does that mean? And a little bit of doubt was thrown around. So to be able to point at the weak spots and say, here's potential to improve, I think that that's important and something that, we can chat about and have a little bit of insight on, having looked at what all the other brands do. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm kind of excited for this. I think it's a cool option. It'll be interesting to see how quickly it's adopted. What lease deals come out that are competitive right now. They're like you're saying, it's a premium option. It's a premium price tag, but I think that this could fit a lot of people's needs for their next electric vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe practical enough. If you get if I had the kind of money for a Polestar 3, I would love this thing. In a few years, fingers crossed, I have a little more money. When they build a version of this on the EX60 platform, the slightly smaller Volvo, that would be my dream vehicle. Because I still think this is very large. It's a very comfortable 2-row SUV. What they've done is take a 3-row SUV and make it very luxurious. That's great for 5 passengers. I personally await a slightly smaller version of this vehicle with a lot of interest. But for those folks who are interested, I'd love to hear what they think of this. Folks like your sister's father-in-law, or just customers who actually still have their order, might be getting it delivered soon. Totally. Would love to hear their thoughts.
Definitely. Me too. Let us know in the comments and let me know. Is my sister's father-in-law my father-in-law? I really like him. He could be my father-in-law.
Sorry, Francie. I misheard you earlier.
No, I mean, I might have said it wrong, but I am truly... I'll call him my father-in-law. I think that fits my needs
how far
perfectly.
Does the in-law label go? That's
another
podcast.
Right? Another podcast for another time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Max, for coming on to talk about the Polestar 3 as a Polestar 2 owner and driver. Would love to hear y'all's thoughts about Polestar in general and this EV coming to the market in the US. We will talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day. See you on the next episode of the Out of Spec podcast. Bye-bye.